This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Hey guys, the Rob McNealy here, and today I am excited. So I am talking to Noir. He is the host of the Cigars and Crypto podcast, and he is a really cool dude. So we're just going to kind of ham it up a little bit tonight and see what's happening on his side of the country. So Noir, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm well, my friend. Thank you so much for having me. How about you?
Good. You know, it's been interesting with this little pandemic, adjusting but not adjusting. So like a lot of times people are like freaking out because they're, home with their kids and they're working remote. And
Right.
My wife and I have been working out of the house forever, and we've been homeschooling our kids for 10 years. So our kids are like not really, it's funny because our kids are like, what's going on? Because to them, this is like normal life. And they're just like, I thought everybody else is freaking out, but it's no big deal. I'm like, because your life is already kind of like this. But it's been interesting. My wife, for her company, she telecommutes to Washington, D.C., and she's like one of the only people in her country, a company that works remote, and she's at the deputy director level for a big company out there. And it's funny because her entire company went remote, and they're all freaking out. And it's funny because I listen to her like conference call sometime, and I'm just sitting there laughing, and they're like, her HR department is like sending memos around to help support the troops with their new, like, staying home from, the office kind of thing, and telling them, make sure you get up in the morning and put on your dress clothes like normal. And my wife's like, dude, I've been wearing pajamas to work for 7 years with this company. I am not getting dressed now. So it's kind of funny.
Right.
So, let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Well, I am the host of Cigars and Crypto. It started out as guys sitting in a cigar lounge and me sitting in there with a tablet and my MacBook, and people asking me, what are you always staring at? You don't talk to us. And I'm like, I'm looking at Bitcoin charts. And of course, the next question is, well, what's Bitcoin? And so I explained to them, what this magical internet money was, and how it's both money and an asset all rolled in one. And so then they kind of looked at me like, well, how does that work? And so down the rabbit hole we went. I explained it to one person, and 3, and 5. And then I found myself explaining it over and over and over again for about maybe 7 months. And I said, you know what, there's got to be an easier way to do this. So I said, I'm just going to start recording things. I have a background in radio. I did country radio for a couple of years and gospel radio as well. So I was familiar with the recording aspect, but I never thought about doing a podcast. So I just said, well, I'll just give it a shot. And here I am, episode 96 later. And I'm like, maybe I'm on to something here.
So what part of the country are you out of? You don't have to give an exact location, but I'm just curious.
Problem. I'm just outside of Philadelphia, man.
Just outside Philly. So what do you find is the response? You go into these, what do they call them, huffs or herfs or whatever at the cigar bar kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's their response when you kind of explain what internet money is and stuff like that? Are they into it? They in denial? They hate it? What are you seeing?
They look at it from a speculative point of view. The thing about cigar smokers is it's not a cheap hobby. So a lot of the guys I smoke with are already investors. But because they don't understand cryptocurrency, they tend to shy away from it. But they like to ask a lot of questions about it. So they have lots of questions about custody, volatility, not so much where to get it, how to get it. They're not hung up on the criminal aspects, potential criminal aspects of cryptocurrency. They're really hung up on, what is this? How does it work? how do I see it? How do I own it? What can I do with it? That type of thing, you know. So that's kind of interesting. Some of uh, my friends are libertarians, so they've always looked at like, this is money, bro. This is like the best money, bro. You know, and I agree with it because for me, Bitcoin is sound money. And so then there's just some people who just like, oh, Bitcoin crashed, it won't ever be anything, and then they'll see it go up $100, and then they'll say, what's Coinbase? How do I get onto that? If I spend $100, will it be 1,000 next week? And I'm like, come on, man. You got to do your homework. You got to do your research.
So have you converted a lot of people then?
A lot, no, maybe 10.
That's a good fair amount though. I
Uh,
mean, I don't think I've converted 10. You know, really, it's been interesting seeing where people are with crypto.
yeah.
So where do you see it going over the next year or two? Do you think the halvening is going to make a big difference for Bitcoin? I mean, I think there is it priced in? Is the pandemic priced in? That's what I'd like to know.
I think the halvening is priced in, but I do not think the pandemic is priced in. I think all of this printing of money is going to inflate the value of Bitcoin. Not monetary value, but source of wealth value. And I say that because people will be looking for something that is stable, that can't be manipulated. When people start going to the gas stations and it's cost $7 to get a gallon of gas, or they go to buy a loaf of bread and it costs $3 because there's so much money that's been printed, people will start to look for things that they can use to um, um, conduct commerce and trade and buy things. And when people look at cryptocurrency, they'll begin to ask the same questions I asked in 2014. What is money? What is the difference between hard and soft money? And why is hard money better? What is sound monetary policy and principle? They won't ask it that way, but they'll have very basic questions. Why doesn't this work?
You know, I think that's an excellent point, right? And you could say the same thing about the pandemic. And I think part of the problem is, I think a lot of people have a hard time abstracting things that they can't physically see or physically touch.
Right.
And so when the money situation, when they start seeing, oh, the price of this is going bananas, and I think that loaf of bread's going to go up regardless of what the dollar's doing, because I have concerns about the supply chain anyway. Um, but I think it's the same thing with the pandemic. People on the East Coast, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I have a lot of friends in New York City. And when I was telling them to get the hell out of New York City 4 weeks ago, they're like, it's no big deal. Oh, there's been a few. And now there's like 1,000 bodies a day stacking up in New York City right now with COVID. And they're like, yeah, this is serious. And I'm like, okay, but I was telling you that a month ago. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I don't want to be that guy, because this is not the thing I want to be right about. But I think you're right. I think, uh, when it starts hitting people in the checkout line, I think that's when they're going to start looking for alternatives to the
Mm-hmm.
dollar.
Yeah. Because for right now, everything is abstract to them. It doesn't impact me. It's not affecting me. They look around and they see gas at $1.89, and they're like, "Oh, this is the best it's been in decades," you know. But they're not understanding what's coming on the other side of that, because the amount of money that we've pumped into the economy, because of the backroom deals by politicians and bureaucrats that we're not privy to, that information that we're not privy to, how it will directly impact us, even though we don't have direct knowledge of what's happening. Um, I prefer to stay prepared as best I can. I try to make sure that my family is prepared as well, not just in terms of defense, but understanding, knowledge, and information as well.
I think preparedness is one of those things that um, is going to get more important going forward on all fronts.
Yeah.
Both, I think, I mean, I don't know if you've ever really listened to the show very much, but I rattle on, at least on Twitter, about financial literacy being an important thing. And part of that is crypto, and I believe investing in other asset classes and diversification. I'm old, so I don't have all my eggs in one basket,
Right,
but
right.
and I just think that's sound investing, right? You don't want to put everything in one place,
Mhm.
um, but what I tell people is, you got to prepare yourself in other places too. It's like, it's great if you got some investment in Bitcoin, but if you're carrying, 100 grand in credit card debt and student loan debt, why don't you need to focus on that and
Right,
get your house in order.
right.
Because to me, long term, yeah, you can gamble on crypto, and really a lot of crypto is gambling right now. And I'm not
Mhm.
bad mouthing any crypto. I run or I'm involved in a crypto project. Co-founded a crypto project. So, I still see even our project as high risk investing if you're viewing it as a speculative asset, because it's so
Right.
early on right now, and it's just the nature of the beast. But that doesn't mean that, I would like to see, well, I'd like to see people have an awakening from the pandemic. You
I
know, you
want
know,
I want that to happen, but I don't think people can keep their eyes off the television, keep their ears off the radio, and their ears out of the echo chambers that surround them every day. When you have, and it doesn't matter your political persuasion, when you exist in an echo chamber, you suffer from cognitive dissonance, and you look for thoughts and ideas that reinforce your own. And the act of doing that prevents or prohibits you from receiving new information or looking at things differently and making your own decisions and your own determinations on what your reality is and what's going on around you. And that's why we have these people kind of falling into these camps, um, and not really looking out for their neighbor the way they should be, because of like tribalism. I don't really subscribe to that. I like people who are different than me, because it's an opportunity for me to learn and experience new things. I am different from everyone that I live around, but I found out in the last 3 weeks that I'm really not. Because now, well, I mean, of course, we maintain our social distance, but I see my neighbors every day now, and I talk to them every day now. And my neighbors are really cool, like really cool. And I didn't know that because we're so caught up in the rat race, the 9 to 5, every day, that you don't really stop and have an opportunity to talk to people. So the awakening, the potential and possibility for an awakening is there, but people have to get away from the noise and just get to know the person to the left and the right of you.
I think there was, and that point was brought up in a book I read a long time ago. And it says, and this is an old book, and it was talking about the internet age, and it says people can talk to people around the world now, but they don't talk to their neighbor, kind of thing, right? And I think with social media and online communities, we now have that option to just pick and choose that echo chamber of everybody we like that
Right.
agrees with us, without having to necessarily, it's easy to filter out the crap you don't want to see.
Hmm.
That's what the block and mute buttons are for, and I'm just as guilty of using those buttons as anybody else is. um, but I think you're right. I think that some good things are going to come out of this pandemic and the economic fallout from now. I'll be the first to say, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. I don't believe COVID is causing the problem with the economy. I think it's a trigger exposing an existing problem with our financial systems, and I believe a problem with American culture. And I want to get I'll go in and explain what I mean by that, but I want to hear your take on it. I know that's loaded questions, aren't they?
Okay. All
Not,
right.
we're just gonna skim the surface
All
here.
right.
No.
Just the surface, right? Okay. Um, As Americans, we are greedy. We consume more than we need. We spend more than we should. We take on debt instead of saving. We have very high time frames for life instead of thinking about the future. That affects businesses, that affects commerce, trade, our spending habits. We are to blame for what happened to the economy. I don't blame politicians because we put them in office. We listened to what they had to say and we put them in office anyway. And we keep putting the same people in office over and over and over again. And they are not doing things in our best interest. So I don't blame them. COVID did not cause what's happening to the economy. The economy was on its way down anyway. The economy has been down since 2007. Don't
All right.
go ahead.
I was going to say you're in my echo chamber now. But I agree with you. And you're hitting on all the points that I hit on. And people hate me when I talk about this. And I say, it's like this. Really? If the entire country is destitute with 2 weeks of not getting a paycheck, we're so much more fucked than whatever this virus is going to do to us.
Exactly.
I think humans can adapt to all sorts of good things and can adapt to shit. And I am utterly dismayed that our country is so, how do I say, fragile. Mm-hmm. And look, we all live paycheck to paycheck. All right. Well, here's the problem. Maybe you shouldn't live paycheck to paycheck. Why are you living paycheck to paycheck if there's that many people? Don't get me wrong. Now, one of the things I did as an entrepreneur, believe it or not, I owned a ghetto liquor store in Denver, in the worst neighborhood in Denver. We open carried pistols in the store. Everything was behind the counter, bars on the window. I'm originally from the Detroit area too. So, but I grew up in Michigan. But when I lived in Denver and we had our store, it was interesting to me because the people coming into the store were low-income people. And these people had $300 shoes. Every one of them had big screen TVs because they talked about it. Every one of them had the latest and greatest, most expensive iPhone. Now, at the time, I was running a Cricket phone, flip phone kind of. Oh, it looks an awful lot like this one. But to me, it was like shocking because we weren't living paycheck to paycheck at that time. Like we had some money in the bank and some savings and we're trying hard to, get rid of the little debt we had at the time and things like that. It was a long time ago. But it's interesting to me that one of the things about our poor people in this country is that our poor people are obese and they have every possible consumer electronic gadget and consumer luxury good you can imagine. Mm-hmm. And having traveled a little bit, it's amazing to see that. And to me, I believe it's a cultural flaw in the United States. And I think it's part of our downfall.
I think it's a byproduct of advertisement and communication. Folks don't do better if they don't know to do better. If you are surrounded by images of $300 tennis shoes and iPhones and big TVs and flashy cars, those are the things that you strive to obtain. If you're never taught about sound money or what a checkbook is or how to invest or the proper way to budget, you won't do it. In some cases, some people learn differently. Life experience changes them in a way that they have to learn. But if everything around you is moving at the same pace, there's no need for you to slow down or speed up. And so people emulate what they see. And I think about, one of the books that really changed my life, man, was The Bitcoin Standard. And it really changed the way I look at money and how I view what money is and what money should be. Um, no one taught me that. I asked questions and became curious because I didn't expect the answers I got. And so I wanted to validate what I was hearing and what I was reading. So I read something else and I read something else and I read something else. And then I looked at my decisions and was like, yo, like, I got to change some things. If I want something 20 years from now, I can't keep doing this today. I've got to learn how to put money away. I've got to learn how to start looking for assets, appreciating assets, not depreciating assets. I don't want to go out and buy, even though I can afford, I don't want to go out and buy a 2020 Lexus. Now, I will go out and buy a 1964 Ford F-100 pickup truck and never drive it. You see what I mean? And then wait 10 years and then sell it for 5 or 10,000 more than what I paid for it.
Oh, those fleet sides are going up in value, aren't they?
I'm trying to tell you, baby. I'm trying to tell you, baby. And
I watched Barrett Jackson.
Yeah, man. My wife looks at me like I'm crazy. She's like, "You're such an old man." I'm like, "No, I'm trying to tell you there's something to this. Not only is it beautiful, but it will appreciate in value over time."
I think one of the things you're hitting on is really good, and I think a really good primer of this thinking as well is Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a very cliche book, but it really lines out the basics. Fact is where you even outside of sound money, though,
Right.
Robert Kiyosaki is now on the Bitcoin bandwagon and crypto bandwagon as well now. But the whole point is getting your financial ducks in a row. And I think, Dave Ramsey, that's a great place to start. Financial Peace University. Right. And
Right.
so I grew up in a fairly poor family, and I came from people that were the poor dads in that book. My family, that was my family. And so I had learned really bad money management behaviors from my family, and when I'm bashing financial literacy in this country, it's not even demographic specific. It crosses every income, every ethnic, demographic, every education level in this country. Almost everybody falls down into the same problems of living paycheck to paycheck, spending more than they make, not saving money, getting into a lot of debt. That is normal in the United States today. And the reason I'm talking about is not because I want to rub it in people's faces when they're struggling. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm hoping is that once we get through this nightmare that's unfolding in like slow motion, because it is in slow motion for a lot of people, is I hope that they come out of this going, holy crap, I need to do something different because I could only last 2 weeks.
Right.
And basic financial literacy is 3 to 6 months or at least a year's worth of emergency fund. Now think of it this way, Noir. Think of it, what happens if 75% of the country had a 6-month emergency fund right now? Things would be very different right now.
Very different.
With this pandemic.
Very different. Because then if we had 6 months of savings, if 75% of us had 6 months of savings, we would be able to see the difference between the sham economy and the real economy, because the stock market is not the economy. And I try to tell people that all the time and they don't get it. But businesses may be hurting, but the economy will be fine because people would have saved and prepared and will be able to take care of their needs, not just saving money, but saving food, saving ammo, saving the things that are important. When these folks were going out buying toilet paper, bro, I was buying bullets because I knew.
Actually, I think both are a good investment right now. And I finally figured out why the toilet paper actually makes a lot more sense and why that's not being stocked, but we can go into that offline. but no, I've been trying to dig into the supply chain stuff. It's pretty fascinating. I learned a lot more about toilet paper than I ever thought I would want to know about toilet paper in the last 3 weeks. But I think what I'm seeing out there is that Americans not only are monetarily not prepared. They're not prepared from a personal defense standpoint. They're not prepared for retirement either. Is that we're inherently a really weak nation now. We're fragile, and psychologically, I'm not sure that I'm not sure in the next 2 years what the country is going to look like on the other side of those 2 years. What do you think? Do you think there's going to be big changes culturally in this country from this?
I think culturally and economically, there'll be massive changes from this. We fall victim to propaganda, and other countries for the last, 10 years, specifically the BRICS nations, have been preparing for a calamity. BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They have been buying stockpiling gold, platinum, palladium, rhodium. They are preparing to trade with each other for oil and other goods and services in gold, bypassing the petrodollar. They've been preparing. We've been blustering. And as powerful as our military is, and I am in no way shitting on our military. I'm a 7-year Army vet, so I am not shitting on the military. But as powerful as our military is, our military cannot function if it is not financed. And we have depressed the dollar so much. I am actually scared of external threats, less internal threats. You know what I mean?
Yep. You know, it's interesting. It's a good exercise. You don't know me that well, but I tend to go down some really deep rabbit holes when I want to know information.
Okay.
And I have a really big network, and I know a lot of interesting and resourceful people in a lot of interesting positions all over the place. So if I really want to have a question, I have enough people in my Rolodex that are worth, 8, 9 digits and have lots of connections. So if I have a weird question, I can pick up the phone and they'll take my calls. And one of those things that I've gone down that rabbit hole about the military, and you start looking at, okay, how is the United States poised for a war? So it's interesting right now. And I'm going down this rabbit hole right now, but what happens if we can't make ammunition and there's a war, or even just more war than we have right now? So I don't know if you've been to any kind of store. Now, we all know there's been a lot of FOMO buying guns and ammo, but I have a lot of connections into the arms industries, and I'm going to confirm some of these things, but I've been talking to quite a few people, and I have a bunch of wholesale accounts as well. There's no ammunition in the distributor network or the retail network at this point. There's nothing. You can't order it from RSR. You can't order it from Crow Shooting Supply. And these are the biggest distributors that distribute to all the retailers nationwide in the gun world. They don't have any ammo either. They don't have any way to back order the ammo. And so I started going down rabbit holes, and I'm like, what's the problem? So here's an interesting thing that no one's talking about, and I've been talking about this since January. So China's been offline since January. They make everything. And people don't even know the extent that we're dependent on China. Like, we're not like, oh, we could just ignore them. More like, they're like holding us up when we're walking down the street, kind of dependent on them.
Mm-hmm.
So the interesting thing, I started looking at the supply chain, because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna move up here because I'm getting all excited now. But so I started looking at the supply chain stuff. Do you know there's this thing called buffer inventory? So I said, okay, if ships stop moving cargo from China to the United States, how long before we run out of stuff? And no one's talking about that question. No one, not in the mainstream media. I have a hard time even finding information about people who would ask that question. So in my day job, I got a lot of people that manufacture stuff in China, and I just started picking up the phone. And they said, if we don't get shipments by May, we're out of our inventory by June. And they don't have any firm dates from China. And then I started saying, okay, well, what's the buffer inventory in the United States? Well, for most things, and I'm talking about everything, it's 1 to 4 months of buffer inventory in the United States for almost anything. China's not back online yet. So another way so I go down this other rabbit hole, right? And I'm just like, I'm really interested in like, okay, well, how do we confirm that there's a problem with the amount of stuff moving? Well, there's this thing called the Dry Baltic Index, which is the marketplace where people buy shipping containers to move raw goods, not necessarily finished goods.
Mm-hmm.
It's fell off a cliff. No one's buying shipping from China to the US. And so I've started talking to people, and, I started looking, I go, what are the things that we need in the United States to live? I'm not talking TVs at Walmart. We got plenty of those, right? And everybody's going to buy them with their stimulus Trump bucks. But they make 90% of our drugs and drug precursors in China right now.
Yes.
Here's a couple other things they make. They also make all the ingredients and food processing chemicals for our food supply. And then on top of that, most of our seafood comes from China. So just on that alone, it's like, wow. And no one's talking about this. And then the toilet paper thing. So I always think ahead, right? I always stock up on stuff. And I said, of all the things that's not back in inventory right now at any grocery store out here, is toilet paper and paper goods are still gone. Totally gone. And so I went down this rabbit hole, Noir, of how much toilet paper, do you know how much toilet paper we buy in the United States every year? You know how big the market is?
It's probably massive.
Massive. $6 billion a year. So
Yeah.
about what we spend.
That sounds about right.
But do you know that most of it's actually made in the United States? Actually, we don't actually import much toilet paper. We import about $500 million a year in toilet paper. Most of it doesn't even come from China. It comes from Indonesia. So it's really interesting to me. I'm like, okay, so why are the shelves empty? This just can't all be FOMO buying. Well, we found 2 problems though. And the thing that I just uncovered the other day is I'm like, well, what's the problem? Well, guess what? Even though we make the toilet paper here, the recycled paper that makes the toilet paper is like the cheapest pulp comes from China. I think they're out because China's not back in line yet. And in fact, I dug into that rabbit hole. So we send whole cargo ships of, all that recycled cardboard and plastic or paper that, gets bundled up, goes to China. They turn it into pulp and ship it back. And then we make it into toilet paper. The other problem with the supply chain, we got a couple problems with the supply chain in the country, but that's one of those external threats. Here's another interesting thing. I started looking at all these other countries with COVID. Now we're getting into a whole prepper, weird, crazy conversation. But I started talking to people and, what happens when India and, and some of these other countries start having a problem with COVID? How would that affect the supply chain and how could that affect us? Well, it's interesting. India is a big country and they're going to have a big problem, I think, with this pandemic. And they're just getting started. They're like the number 2 rice exporter in the planet. So what happens if because of absenteeism from illness and lockdowns and fear, they don't produce, let's just say they produce less rice, not no rice, but less rice. They feed a lot of countries. And what are those other countries going to do? Here's another thing. So we've had 4 meat packing plants in the United States go down because of COVID in the last week and a half. 4 in the last week and a half. And we're talking one plant alone does 5% of the pork for the entire United States. Wow. Just went down in the last week. So a meat and a beef plant in Iowa, one of the biggest beef slaughterhouses in northern Colorado in Greeley, and then pork processing plant up in Sioux Falls,
Mm.
South Dakota. All went down in the last 10 days because of COVID. They don't know when they're coming back online. So you have this absenteeism. So there's food and pigs and cows in the United States. But if you can't get them processed, what's that going to do to the people in Philly at the grocery store?
Right.
Right. What does that do? So we're talking about that loaf of bread getting more expensive just because of inflation for money. What happens when that price goes up 2 or 3 times because there's no one to process as much? Or what happens if the truck drivers are too afraid to drive truck across country to a pandemic zone, which you're already seeing in New York City now? And it's going to get worse through the summer, I predict, from all the major cities. Especially, I think every major city east of the Mississippi is going to have a problem with COVID, bad. And so that's my prediction. You can call me out on it by August. We'll have a conversation and a cigar over it. But these are the things that I am getting concerned about. Now, here's the thing. Where did we get a lot of our produce from in the wintertime?
Mexico, China.
Yeah, Mexico. So what happens if they have absenteeism from fear and illness? Now, right now, you can't cross the border to Mexico.
Right.
Well, all those workers that work our fields come from Mexico.
Right.
Regardless of what the conservatives want to believe about rural America and farmers, they're all run by Mexicans.
Right.
That's just a fact. So the workers can't get here. But what happens if Mexico's farms have the same problem we do? What if their processing plants go down because of fear and illness from COVID in the wintertime, this fall? What does that do to the price of food? Now, I've spent a lot of time in inner cities now, and, I know I come from a poor family. So what happens to people that are dependent on EBT? And now that price of hamburger went from $4 a pound to $15 a pound or $20 a pound. How are those people going to react when their food stamps don't go very far now? And those are the things that keep me concerned. But, then you get into the international, incidents with like, okay, well, if countries don't have enough food now to feed their people, what are they going to do? And put your military thinking hat on. What does that look like in a year from now?
Yeah.
And so I think we have multiple problems happening. And I think COVID is the trigger to basically say, look, this emperor has completely naked now, and you guys got a lot of problems.
Right.
Ranting, but those are the things that have me concerned right now.
I'd have to agree with all of those assessments, man. If I could convince my wife, man, we would be out of here. My family immigrated here from the Bahamas in the 1920s, and I still have family there. And if I could convince my wife, man, we would be out. Like,
to the Bahamas, or
damn right, right now.
I'm not sure I'd want to go on an island right now, to be honest.
Why?
Because they're actually all the Caribbean islands right now are having problems with COVID too.
Yeah.
So the question is, on an island, you're completely dependent on outside logistics for your support. If those logistics chains start getting broken, you're really kind of on an island.
Just eat fish every day.
If you can. I don't get hated. I love the Caribbean, man. I've been to a lot of Caribbean islands, and man, I would be all about at least having a second house there. I'm not sure I'd want to ride out this there right now. We moved to Salt Lake City, I don't know, 6 years ago now. And I think it was a smart move because as far as urban or suburban areas, we're one of the most prepared states on the planet. Like part of the LDS culture, the Mormon culture, is that, they're supposed to have a year's supply of food. A lot of people don't know that, but like the whole Mormon church is one giant prepper organization. And in fact, the Mormon church has its own grain silos all over the place. And they have their own food processing canneries and everything. I mean, they're really dialed in. And so people in Utah are pretty resilient and self-reliant. And that was one of the things that attracted me to the Utah in general, was that self-reliance. And so far with COVID, We're one of the only states that's not locked down. We're in a voluntary soft lockdown. Like the governor comes on every day at, lunchtime and says, please, 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 please don't make me become a tyrant and force you. He's like, just do the right thing.
Right.
But we haven't had many cases here. So we've had 20 deaths in the whole state, but it's picking up space. It's picking up pace now. So, I think we're going to be one of the last to go if it goes bad, just because one, we're small population and we're fairly isolated compared to, east of the Mississippi. It's just so much more crowded in the East Coast and the Midwest that it's just a lot harder, I think, with this. I mean, so what does your wife think about all this? You sound like you're a preparedness guy too, right?
I am, but she's she's not for that. She thinks I'm overreacting.
Why does she think you're overreacting?
Because she's never seen me act like this before.
Really? How are you acting?
Like I need to be prepared.
Gotcha. I
You know,
think, but were you prepared before, or is this something more recent, or has this been like an ongoing thing? Without divulging any OPSEC, right?
Right,
Keep
right.
I don't need to know what you have or don't have, but I just like to understand where people are coming from, because
I've always believed in having a little more than what's absolutely necessary.
I think that's
Now
smart.
I'm like, we need to go all in. We need to be we really need to be the squirrel and storing acorns for a real bad winter.
I agree with you. Now, I have no OPSEC because I run a prepper crypto conference every year. So it's kind of obvious that I do put things away. And that's kind of it's just part of who we are. We don't
Right.
even think about it. It's just like, but it's funny because we just opened up pinot beans from 2011 the other day. And they were fine, by the way.
Right, of course.
And they tasted really good.
Right.
But you're like, I don't, it's one of those things like, I hope I never have to open this 5-gallon bucket of pinto beans. But I'm glad I had the pinto beans kind of thing.
Right.
But I think what I've been telling people right now, because there's a lot of people that are waking up. I'm a gun guy, and it sounds like you're a gun guy as well.
Yep.
Have you had a lot of people ask you about that? Guns recently?
What do you mean? Ask me what?
Like people that are non-gun people getting interested in wanting information about guns?
No. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm a gun guy, but they don't ask me about them.
No, because it's interesting because I've had 4 people in the last 2 weeks. 3 were first-time gun buyers wanting to know what to buy, where to buy, that kind of thing. And then one person was looking for food. It's like, and I'm like, of course, I'm like, oh, of course, I'm the guy you call. But it's been interesting seeing like people getting concerned now. And I tell people right now, if you have it prepped, you got one last opportunity right now.
Yeah.
To get as much as you can get. But I tell people, first thing you need to do is mentally prepare yourself for change. Probably drastic change.
Yes.
Probably tough times.
Yes.
But mentally prepare yourself that life is not going to be the same, and get okay with that.
Right. And it's going to happen quickly.
It's not happening quickly enough.
That's because I don't think we're where we need to be yet.
Well, I think I was telling someone the other day that I think people don't have a sense of urgency outside of the East Coast right now at all about this. All they want to do is they're healthy. They don't see a problem. There's not bodies stacking up. And so I think what's happening is they can't abstract what's happening. I think it's a combination of normalcy bias, time preference. I think it's like there's a glacier coming, a really big freaking glacier, and it's going to run over your town.
Right.
But everybody's like, well, I don't see the glacier move, but it's going to run over the town. Well, I don't see it moving, so I'm not going to do anything. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that because of
Yeah.
it. And then they see the more immediate, I'm not working, I don't have money coming in. And dude, those are all valid concerns, especially if you don't have any savings.
Right.
So I don't have a good answer to that. But this is not just a COVID glacier. This is a supply chain glacier that's affecting the entire planet in a slow moving wave like a glacier.
Right.
And it's going to take a year before, it's going to take months. I would bet it's going to be a very scary summer, is what I predict. Because I think you're going to see a lot of cities all flaring up at the same time. I think you're going to have the buffer inventories from China burn through. I think you're going to have a lot of absenteeism and, shortages because of this plant's going down and this plant's going down. And I think all that stuff's going to be rolling. So it's like you're going to, New York will be starting to be through its peak, and then Chicago is going to be hitting its peak,
Right.
or just starting in Detroit and St. Louis. And it's just going to go on and on and on. And it's going to take, all right, well, I'll be, New York hasn't peaked yet. So understand this, right? Like it's been 6 weeks. We had it's like state of New York is like what, 20 some thousand now or something. I mean, 6 weeks ago they had zero. I mean, it's like gradually, but that's just one major city with it. But what happens when you have 4 cropping up in 6 more weeks? And what does
Right.
that look like? And right now, most of the resources to handle COVID have been redirected to New York from other places. So I think the response to COVID is going to be scary. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to, not make it through this.
Right.
But I think what's going to affect all of us is the supply chain failures domestically and internationally. And I think that and how people react to them. The question is, how do people react? And are you from Philly your whole life? And
No,
you said your family came from Bahamas. Where were you raised?
I was born in New York, but I was raised in DC.
Okay. So, and I've lived all over, but I've been out west about 20 years, but I grew up in the Midwest. So I spent 20 years in the Detroit area, or 28 years actually, in the Detroit area. I know that Americans have never had to deal with empty shelves. Think about that.
Never.
Never. Now, I've traveled a little bit. You probably traveled a little bit. You go to other places. Well, I don't have there's nothing on the shelf for a month, but next month there'll be something on that shelf. And people are okay with that because that's the system.
Right.
That's what they're used to. And the more third world or developing nations, that's common, right? Well, we'll get something pretty soon. They don't know. Americans have never had to deal with that. I'm 48. I'll be 48 this summer. I've never seen that in my lifetime.
Now, add to that we are the nation with the most guns per person on the planet.
Yep.
It's going to be
It's
Mad
gonna be,
Max in the Thunderdome here, bro.
I don't know where this is going to go. I'm just saying is if you're like, imagine if you're like around I think like a big pot. You're in the kitchen, right? You got a big giant pot. And you're just throwing in, you're just going to make the most worst meal ever. And you're going to just throw in some throw in some Molotov cocktail, a little gasoline, a little acid, gunpowder, TNT, nuclear weapons, throw in some pathogens, stir it all up and let it launch in the middle of the summertime in the Midwest, like Detroit and Philly and Chicago, and then tell people they got to be locked in their house because there's a pandemic and they don't have air conditioning.
Right.
I'm just like, but I even think about the air conditioning piece, right? I mean, I've been around a lot of inner cities growing up and where I've worked and stuff. And this is not a stereotype. It's a fact. A lot of people don't have central air in inner cities in the Midwest. Detroit area, every summer when there's a heat wave in Detroit, there's people dying because they don't have air conditioning. And think about it. So, and part of the response to that is people hang out outside. They got barbecue. They hang out with their friends. They hang out late at night instead of during the day because they don't want to be in their hot house. So what happens if you stir all that in top of that? Oh man, I am not looking forward to this summer at all with this. And I think the COVID is just exposing all sorts of problems that already were there. And I think a lot of people are going to get mad. A lot of people are going to get frustrated. There's not things on the shelves. I think people are going to be pissed that things cost a lot more. I think people are going to be pissed because they're told to stay in the house. They don't want to stay in the house. Let's just be honest. People don't like being told what to do.
Right.
Anyways, I'm ranting. I'm sorry. It's like, man, I don't know, man. I think it's gonna be whack. That's what I think. It's gonna be a whack
It's going to be
summer.
interesting.
And so, what do you think people should be doing? So all right. So people here, like, they're not on the East Coast, not in the Midwest. They're just like do. What would be your saying? What would be your advice right now to those people?
Move out of debt, move out of credit, start putting away a little cash. Start putting away things that you can trade. Start thinking about how you'll defend yourself and your family. Start thinking about how you'll feed yourself and your family. Make those things a priority. Because when the time comes and you realize that you need to do it, it's already too late. Because other people are realizing at the exact same time that they need to do it. And then it becomes survival of the fit. And the question is, how fit are you?
Couldn't disagree with any of that. And man, I'm usually a lot more uplifting than this.
Me too, man.
No, but seriously though, I mean, I think that's a good point. Is cover your freaking bases right now. You're sitting home. Don't look at Pornhub all day. Don't play video games all day. Start figuring out what you need to do to get past 6 months from now.
Right.
What's that going to look like?
Right.
I don't have a crystal ball, and I sure as hell hope that all the stuff we talked about doesn't happen. I really hope it doesn't happen. And you know what? I've been wrong before. I thought the shit was going to melt down in 2013. I'll tell you that. I thought 2013, if I had to put the crystal ball on it, I was, my tea leaves are telling me 2013, it's all over with. It's going to go Mad Max. That's what I thought. Didn't happen. They pumped up the housing market again. And now the housing market's way crazier now than it was in 2007, 2008. And I think that's another shoe that's going to drop. And what do you think about that? What do you think is going to happen in housing?
People out of work, they won't be able to pay their mortgages.
Yeah. And the banks are already tightening their credit lines again, and they're already getting recommended. My wife is super smart. I'm the dumb one of the family. My wife's really smart. And we were walking around the neighborhood, and there was a house that same size as mine, but they remodeled it, and they sold it for 2.5 times what my house is worth right now. And it's just a brick ranch house. Okay. I mean, this is not a fancy neighborhood or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But the numbers on the house, I mean, I look it up. I like to look at real estate. I like to see what's happening. And I was like, there's no way in hell. I mean, we could afford that, but there's no way in hell I'd pay that.
Right.
I think we overpaid for my house when we bought it. And my house has doubled in the last 5 years. And I said, there's no way I would buy my house for what it's valued at right now. I would not spend it. It's not worth it to me. Right. It's just, it's ridiculous. My wife made a good point though. She's like, cause we were growing up with the house during the last housing crash. And she's like, this housing crash is going to be a lot faster to bottom. And I go, what do you mean by that? She's like, think about it. In 2007, the price of a house was about a third what it is now for the same house. Even our old house. It's funny. It's like you look back at what our old house was in Colorado, and we're like, holy crap, it's ridiculous what that house cost. It's ridiculous. So she's like, think about it. This house, so she's like, if a house has an $800,000 a month mortgage, it's going to take 2 people working full time probably to pay for that mortgage. And it's probably like a $5,000, $6,000 a month mortgage. She's like, What if one of those people lose their job? Just one. Now, this is before COVID hit. So this was like this is several months ago. And she had a great point. She says, they can't go and just liquidate their 401k out or go do Uber part-time to come up with that nut every month while they're hoping they get another big boy job. She says that housing market's probably going to hit bottom a lot faster because people are going to run out of money much faster because the mortgages are a lot bigger now. And I thought that was a really interesting point that I hadn't heard anybody else make.
Yeah.
So, I'm worried, my brother. I'm so worried about where people are. And I've been in agony because I see so many people that are destitute so quickly.
Yeah.
I knew it was bad. I mean, I wasn't ignorant to the savings rates and stuff, but the fact that I see people like so depressed and miserable, and I would bet that at the end of the year, you're going to see that the suicide rate's probably going to go crazy this year. And that makes me sad because, regardless, we can get through all this shit. I lived in a van behind a grocery store one summer as like an adult, and that's no bullshit. Okay. I mean, I've really came from a hard life growing up, and, it's like, I'm like, and you know what? None of that shit scares me. I've lost it all and I've had nothing, and I grew up with nothing. So, money and all that kind of stuff, being broke's like, whatever, figure the shit out.
Right.
That's my attitude on it. Not that I want to be poor, because being poor sucks. But what I'm saying is, but for people who have never experienced that,
right,
because they grew up in this debt-fueled, really upper middle class, lifestyle, I think there's going to be a reckoning, and I think those people are going to have a very hard time adjusting to what the future holds.
I think those people will be prey.
Yeah, especially the ones that don't like guns. And what do you think about precious metals? Are you a pro?
I'm a silver bug.
Silver bug. Why silver over gold?
It's in every phone. It's in most of our electronics. The price has been depressed even more than gold. So once the banks get their thumb off of the paper silver supply, and the real value of silver is able to be discovered by the market, I got a pretty good feeling about it.
What is it, 50? Is it at 50 times now?
I thought it was 75.
I haven't looked in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So you really are, like, you are definitely my echo chamber right now. I like silver more than gold too, for the same reasons. That's an interesting thing. The precious metals markets have been really bizarre, haven't they?
Yes.
Tell me about it. What are you seeing out there?
I dollar cost average precious metals the same way I do crypto. And over the last month, actually 6 to 8 weeks, the premium over spot for silver has been bananas. I recently purchased from APMEX, $7.30 premium over spot. Now,
wow.
considering silver is like $14, $15 an ounce,
so it's 30%.
There's a 50% premium on an ounce.
So what does that mean?
They know something that we don't know.
So explain that. So for people that are not gold or silver or precious metal bugs, what does that mean? Can you just go into it a little bit?
Sure. Spot price is how much the market recognizes an ounce of silver for. Let's say it's $15, okay? The premium is charged by the retailer to the consumer because of various reasons, one of which is the difficulty in getting it, or the supply levels, how easy, how much there is to be sold at any given time, how much the mint releases at any given time, or how much silver was mined at any given time. When the supply starts to dry up, the premium on silver goes up because they identify that more people want it, there's less of it, so it becomes the law of supply and demand. So the less silver there is in the market to be sold, and or the less silver has been mined in a month or 6 months or a year, the higher the price of silver will be, and the higher the premium will probably be as well. And so when I went out to do my regular DCA, I'm like, damn, like $7.30. Like, this is like 50%. Like, really? I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I saw it. And I mean, APMEX, Providence, Money Metals, JM Bullion. It didn't matter where you went. The premium was in that range of 50% premium.
Yeah. Well, what I think is interesting is that just based on the markets tanking, just based on global supply chain threats, the spot price of gold and silver should be off the charts. They should be off the chain. They should be going nuts.
Agreed.
They're not.
They're not.
And usually, and you tell me, I mean, typically you might spend $1, even less depending for the premium, if there is one. It's not anywhere near, $7.
Right.
And you might spend 50 cents more for, well, I want this round and it's got a cool design on it or whatever, But what's happening, what it looks like to me, that for a long time in precious metals, a lot of the precious metal bugs out there have been saying that precious metal markets have been artificially depressed. And it's easy to write that off as conspiracy, right? You see that a lot of times too with crypto. Oh, the crypto whales are suppressing the Bitcoin price, whatever, you hear that there too. But it's interesting is that what it looks like's happening, because right now, I don't know how much physical delivery, what lead times are you getting out there for the physical delivery? 2 weeks. We're getting 4 to 6 out in Utah. And so it's interesting. And what they're saying is that the conspiracy theory that I've heard is that there's these paper gold and paper silver, and
Right.
that they've oversold it, meaning that they'll say this one, this security is worth so many ounces of silver, and they sell it and trade it like a stock, like an equity.
Right.
And there's a lot of people have alleged for a long time that they've sold those times more than once, maybe dozens of times. And so what's happening, and why the supply is all janky, is that people now want physical delivery and there's not enough to go around. And so that premium, that's skyrocket. So what should be happening is the spot price should be skyrocketing to reflect market changes and conditions, because this is exactly what precious metals are designed for, are hedged against, and it's not functioning right. But what happens is, since it looks like the market's not being allowed to actually, well, it looks to me that the market is not being allowed to do true price discovery on precious metals for whatever reason.
Right.
And that retail premium is where the market is finding the price.
Right. You're starting to see a real decoupling in precious on-hand metals versus precious paper metals. You're starting to see a real decoupling.
Which then would support that there's been some corruption and maybe some manipulation from the suppression of those prices. And it's like, wow. And it's funny because it's like, this goes back to COVID's the trigger, but it's only exposing this, this other problem, this rot.
Right.
That's been there for a long time. The rot comes from consumerist mentality among Americans. It comes from the lack that we don't save money. We're not financial literacy. That's rot, in my opinion.
Yes.
And then you have, all this just crazy amounts of US dollars being printed. That's rot. And then you have the precious metals markets being rigged, apparently, or oversold. And that's a rot. And all this stuff and all this outsourcing to China for the last 3 decades and how great it was, and I'm from Detroit, so I know I grew up I went through high school in the 80s, and I grew up through all that outsourcing happened in the 80s and the 90s, and then NAFTA happened in the mid 90s. Thank you, Bill Clinton. And so, I saw what it did to Detroit because I grew up there and I was living there in that, and I used to work in the auto industry. And it's like there's rot from all the outsourcing, and it's like there's all this immense amount of shit of rot that's just piled up for decades and decades and decades, and go back to getting off the gold standard a long time ago. And this started probably before I was born, really, but it's all coming to a head from this goddamn virus. It's like, and then the housing market, the student loan bubble, the housing bubble again. It's all just
right
all at once, and it's happening around the planet all at once.
Right.
And it's not happening overnight. It's going to take a year, probably the next year, as this pandemic goes through all those different major population centers. It's gonna, and so it's like it's gonna get good in one spot and then just pop up in 2 more like crazy whack-a-mole. And so I don't know, man. This is probably going to be the most live, historically speaking.
Yeah.
Good or bad, it's going to be a fucking ride.
Yeah.
And you know what? And that's why I need to connect with smart people like you that get it, because if the ones that are slightly prepared are also going to be targets. That's a fact.
Right.
I like to read history, and I actually like to read about Russian history and Ukrainian history and things. And I don't know if you know much about what happened in Ukraine, but when the Soviets invaded the Ukraine, they had like 2 levels of peasants, right? They had the peasants, and the peasants that could hire somebody to work for them. They're only slightly better off peasants. They called them kulaks. And what the Russians did is they said that they created all these policies. The Soviets created all sorts of quotas and stuff. And they said, all these failures are because of the kulaks, because they're rich. They weren't rich. They were just slightly less poor than the average peasant, but they might have, a little bigger farm and employ 2 people or something. That's how the kulaks were. But the Soviets, through propaganda, whipped up so much froth and hate and envy between the super poor peasants and the kulaks. And they blamed every government failure on the kulaks, and to the point where they basically either killed, sent to gulags, or exiled. They confiscated all the property of the kulaks, the entire country. And that's what the whole Ukrainian genocide was about. And they called them kulaks. And I tell people now that, we joke around about toilet paper, envy, and things like that, but we're already starting to see the signs that there's going to be people the preppers, the people that are self-reliant, the people that aren't in debt, the people that, have some savings are probably going to be targets, and it's going to be propagandized much like kulaks were. And I do believe this is going to be a true threat over the next year or more. A friend of mine down in Texas, he's a prepper, and his wife and him, we talk a lot, and she says they actually have some decent, kind of, N95 reusable N95 masks that look kind of stylish. And if you look at my profile picture, I have one too. And because I bought them a long time ago. And it was funny because I talked to him yesterday, and he said, the damnedest thing just happened. I go, what? He goes, my wife was at the store, and somebody started calling her out for having a good mask, not a homemade one. Wow, she's got a real nice mask, and we just got these, homemade ones. And I'm like, holy shit. It's like, I don't know. My mind's just going like crazy places when I hear stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where's it going to go? And that's the stuff that kind of gets me worried about, protecting my family and stuff like that. Is like, you work very hard and save, and you don't go on that family vacation, or you don't go on that big trip because you want to buy, some extra supplies, or buy, you don't buy the nice steak, but you buy a couple extra cans of beans or something. You do that long enough, and, because you feel it's an insurance policy, and then, so you can ride these things out. And then somebody says, or acts like you did something wrong. It's like, I just thought ahead. I was a Boy Scout too, by the way. I was also a firefighter and EMT, so I think about this stuff. But I don't know, man. This is really a downer. Thanks. So what can we do? What can we do to get people to wake up more? How can we help people? Man. How can we help people save themselves? Is it too late?
I hate to go all Iron Rand on you, man, but I'm really not worried about other people.
Fair enough.
Right now, I'm just worried about me and my family. I'll help my neighbor if I have to help my neighbor, but not at the expense of helping my family.
I think there will be a lot of people that'll have to make those choices in the future. And my wife and I, we have these kind of conversations too. It's like, what do you do? And, because people know we have some emergency supplies and stuff. I mean, I don't hide that. I never hide it, because I try to help people and get them excited about it and say, hey, this is an important thing. So I know those decisions I'm going to have to make at some point, because I'm the guy they call already. So right. Looking for advice, right? So it just is what it is. But we knew that we always knew that was a risk. So, there's nothing I can do about that now. But I don't want to be, I always say this, is that I wear a mask, and my families have been wearing masks when we're in public and things, because I don't want to be part of the problem. Because if you're not part of the problem, you can be part of the solution. You know what I'm saying? Right. Don't be a victim first.
Right.
Protect your family. Protect what you got. Because if you're in that position, then you do have the option to help other people.
Right.
And maybe I can't help the whole neighborhood, but maybe I can help one person, you know, and that's what I hope to do. And we're putting in a big garden this year, like a really big garden, like nuts. You'd laugh. It's like a farm. And I told my wife, I go, I don't know where things are going. And she's about 98% where I am. I'm a little more like, no, buy everything we can possibly buy right now. I'm a little more, let's just we got this one last chance. This is how I see it. And I said, let's just put in more, let's till up some more lawn and put in some more plants. And she's like, why do we need more? I go, because we can help other people if we need to. That's why.
Yeah.
And that's how I think, And, it doesn't hurt me to buy, by the way, you can buy seeds at the dollar store for $1. Everybody's freaking out about seeds. Go to the dollar store. Dollar store has the cheapest seeds anywhere in the country. Nobody knows that. I don't know why they don't know that. But did you plant a garden? Are you planting a garden this year? Can you plant a garden?
I can, but I won't be this year.
You need to plant a garden. I'm going to give you some shit about that. I think you should plant a garden. I really do. Please, little garden. Do this for me. Put your wife on. If I want to talk to her. I'm just giving you shit. So, Noir, where can people find out more?
About
you.
Oh, yeah, we went way down a rabbit hole, man. I thought we were going somewhere else. You can find me on Twitter at Invest Noir, INVEST NOIR. Or you can check me out on Instagram at Cigars and Crypto. Or you can listen to me on any of your podcast platforms of choice. Just search for Cigars and Crypto or cigarsandcrypto.com.
You have the best radio voice ever. So, guys, thanks, you got to listen to his podcast. He's got some really, really great points out there. I really like where he's coming from because he is my echo chamber. Thank you so much for listening. This is Rob McNealy. Check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.